Thanks for tuning in once again to more NFL Draft Talk. That's right. We are talking NFL Draft. We're only a few weeks away on Inside Our Lads NFL Depth Charts with Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. Ryan, we're finally really zeroing in now on the NFL Draft. Free agency is kind of behind us, and I don't think we're going to see many signings and trades between now and the draft.
No, it's the free agents that are still out there, the Clownies of the world. They usually sign after the draft at this point. Teams want to see if they could fill holes where they didn't get their pick that they were hoping to get, and then they turn back to free agency.
I want to show everybody now. This I'm gonna in a couple of days. Actually, when we do our show next week, which is going to be on the NFC. This week we're doing the AFC, but this is the Our Lads 2020 draft guide. So in a couple of days, we'll have the 2021 draft guide. Go to ourlads.com right now. I believe orders are being mailed out in a couple of days, so you still have time, and that gives you several weeks. And what I like about having the guides too is not just before the draft, Ryan, but it's after. Because sometimes I think it's more valuable to have the guide after the draft.
Correct. I mean, if you're a fan of your team, you want to know who they're going to pick, but you could look up 20 guys. Your team might not pick any of those 20 guys.
Yeah.
After the draft, you can look at the research, and now you know these are the 7, 8, 9, 10 guys my team picked. I know nothing about this fourth-round middle linebacker, and you can get the scouting report on him before, save yourself from doing the job that you guys, I do, you do, everybody does. Go watch, 48 games worth of Appalachian State tape. Now here's the scouting report on the Appalachian State linebacker my team picked in the fourth round.
Yes. All right, and that's again, it's AFC this week, and then NFC next week, and at some point between now and the draft, we're going to conduct a mock draft. Definitely, Ryan and I, we are going to. I don't want to commit the third person yet, or even tell you who that third person is, but as soon as we get that confirmed, we'll let you know. But we'll put a nice mock draft together, and we're looking forward to that. And don't forget, we're going to be on the air on Friday morning, the day after round one, and then what's the next show after that, Ryan?
After the draft, either Monday or Tuesday.
Oh, the draft recap, yes. That'll be, I believe, on a Monday. All right, sounds good. Let's start. Let's get right into it and start with Jacksonville. And we're going to kind of quickly get through Jacksonville because we've got another Jacksonville pick to get to in a little while. But, I mean, look, it's all about Lawrence. And what I noticed what they've done in as far as free agency, though, that I think is important, and also from what I know about the Jacksonville Jags and talking to Mia O'Brien, who covers the Jags up there in Jacksonville, is that with Urban Meyer now on board, he is going to want to put as many fast, speedy players on his roster as much as he can. So even though James Robinson had a huge year as a rookie last year, and even though they signed his old boy Carlos Hyde, they are going to definitely add another running back at some point with speed. And even though they got a ton of young receivers, keep in mind, a lot of those young receivers don't have speed. He's going to want to at least add one, if not a couple, of fast receivers to that mix as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to – the second pick, I actually think – look, what's interesting is they targeted defense in free agency. They added Griffin, the corner, and Jenkins, the safety. I would not rule out them addressing the secondary again. They're going to be like Bill Belichick. They're going to build their defense from the secondary inwards instead of from the defensive line outwards. So I think they'll probably use a premium pick, whether it's a first rounder or a second rounder, somewhere, maybe a third rounder, somewhere in the first 2 days, they'll go after another safety.
And here's the interesting thing about the defense is that they're bringing in a 3-4 guy that you believe is going to be a 3-4 guy. And if you look at their defense, that does favor K'Lavon Chaisson, who was completely miscast last year. He's a 3-4 edge rusher. That's what he is. He's not a 4-3 defensive lineman. He's not. It's just not what he's built for. And I think if there's any player that's going to benefit from that switch, it's going to be Chaisson.
It's funny. I actually forgot all about him. Oh man.
Yeah, he was forgettable. Exactly. So, and you could put Josh Allen anywhere in any system. So I don't
Yeah.
think that's going to matter. But I thought it was interesting. They brought in Ward from Baltimore, so he knows the scheme. They brought in Malcolm Brown in the trade with the Saints, so he'll help inside. I think Davon Hamilton's a nice defensive lineman. You can put him anywhere. He's got a good future. But they need, and Schobert is probably the most overrated, overhyped, overpaid linebacker in the game. He makes a lot of tackles, but he doesn't do anything as far as game-changing plays. He's not that type of guy. Miles Jack, though, has worked much better on the outside than on the inside. When he switched to the outside, he was a much better player in the system last year, so it'll be interesting exactly how he fits in. But they do have talent in the front seven. I just think that they're going to have to find at least another edge rusher.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Jets, and the Jets deal is all over. We know now what is going to go on with New York. They traded Sam Darnold to Carolina officially. That opens the door for Zach Wilson to be the quarterback of the New York Jets.
Yeah, and then the Jets have the same problem with Zach Wilson that they had with Sam Darnold 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and last year, which is they don't have any help for Zach Wilson. So they better use these picks to get themselves a running back, maybe a Travis Etienne,
Yes.
get themselves another receiver, because you can't just count on, Denzel Mims and oh God, it's escaping me. Who did
Well,
they
got Jamison Crowder and they have Corey
Davis.
Davis. So
yeah,
yeah,
you need another.
Yeah,
You need another receiver. You need better offensive line. I would add another offensive lineman somewhere. I think the Jets are in danger of not learning from their mistakes if they don't surround Zach Wilson with better talent. They got to learn from what they did to Sam.
Now, we had a mock draft with Dan Shanka and the guys that helped out with the draft guide. So everybody that contributed, we did a mock draft, a 7-round mock draft.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had I had the teams that I did for the guide, and of course I had the Jets. So, and I'm going to tell you who I picked for the Jets, and tell me what you think about these picks. So obviously I got Zach Wilson. Then I went with Etienne with the second pick, so he was available. I grabbed him.
He could be there at 34 though.
But I also grabbed Caleb Fairley at 34.
Okay.
So, and I think if he's available based on the injury situation, I think the Jets should definitely take advantage of that because they need a corner. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Then I took.
I mean, if he's there, then yes, that was a
no-brainer. Yeah.
I honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would have done it the opposite. I would have taken Farley in the first round because I would have never thought he'd be there at 34, and I would have thought Etienne would be there. But if any way you slice it, that's a home run first 3 picks.
Yeah. Then the next 3 picks, I took 2 offensive linemen from Ohio State, the guard Wyatt Davis and the center Josh Myers. I put them right there in the middle rounds there, which I think is perfect because I think if the Jets are going to pick linemen, which they will, I think that's where those guys fit the best. You don't need to pick them with the first 2 or 3 picks, but right after those first 3 picks, you got to add some linemen. I also took Baron Browning, the linebacker from Ohio State, because I definitely think the Jets have to add another linebacker. You can't count on Cashman. He's never healthy. And then my last 3 picks, and this is something that hasn't been talked about much. I took the best fullback in the draft, Ben Mason from Michigan. The Jets are going to need a fullback. If you take a look at the offense run by San Francisco last year, Kyle Juszczyk was in on nearly 40% of the offensive snaps. That's a lot. So they need a good fullback. I also took 2 DBs with the final 2 picks. So anyway, I thought if that works out for the Jets, I think they'd be awfully happy to know that you can get maybe the best running back and quite possibly the best cornerback. If he does indeed, like you say, slip, I would be surprised if he gets out of the first round.
I would too.
All right. Next up, Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals. What do you think about their situation right now? They don't have to worry about a quarterback, which is a really good deal.
They don't, which means they could trade down because some teams might be looking for the 4th quarterback there, but I don't think they should. I think when this is kind of like what we were just saying with Wilson and Darnold. When you have a good young quarterback, you have to protect him and give him weapons so that you can win while he's on his rookie contract. So I wouldn't trade down if I was the Bengals. I think they really have the rich man's choice, really, of I think they'll have, do they want the best offensive tackle, huge need, good player, Penei Sewell from Oregon, or do they want to repair Burrow with Jamar Chase? I
Yeah,
think Jamar Chase caught 20 touchdowns from Burrow in his Heisman season. I mean,
that's tempting.
you can't lose.
Yeah.
You can't lose. I know the Bengals turn losses out of can't lose situations all the time. You can't lose with either of those players.
And, like you said, though, I think if they could trade down just a few spots, like let's say Denver, wants to go after one of those guys and they only have to move down to 9. Well, you know what? You might still end up with one of those top receivers or the top tight end, and you have no idea how far Sewell's going to drop. So,
but you could end up with Slater or Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle, which right now, today, sounds nice. But 5 years from now, if Sewell is,
or Chase, yeah.
Or if Chase is Julio Jones and Sewell is, I don't know, Joe Staley, and the other guys are just like good players for a long time, well, then you're going to regret it.
Yeah. I get the feeling they're going to go after Chase, but it does make a lot of sense based on what happened to them last year. They've got to add linemen. If they don't add the linemen with that pick, then they have to add at least 2 or 3 other linemen with their early round picks after the first round.
The one thing that's good for the Bengals is if there's 2 positions that are first, second round deep, I think it's offensive line and wide receiver. So whatever they don't do with 5, they should be able to do with 38 or whatever, 37, whatever it is.
All right, the Dolphins were very active with the trades that it was like within just a few hours apart, and they end up in a pretty good situation with this first pick. We know they're not going to go after a quarterback now, but I get the feeling that, talking to Alan Pupar, we were both simpatico on the pick, even though we know it can go in a multitude of directions. They could go offensive line too. If Sewell's there, that'd be a great pickup. But the wide receiver, they definitely have to add another wide receiver. But it was almost too good to be true that what if they picked up Kyle Pitts? And what kind of a big addition putting Pitts and Gesicki out there at the same time and what that could do to opposing defenses. So I think this could be a place for Pitts. But again, they could go offensive line. They can go wide receiver.
They could do the same thing that the Bengals could do. When the Bengals could reconnect Chase and Burrow, the Dolphins could easily reconnect Tua with either Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle.
Yes.
I think it'll be offensive line. That's my guess. I think if Sewell's still there, I think it'll be him. If not, I wouldn't consider it a reach if they went Slater and you saw 5-6 back-to-back offensive linemen, Sewell and Slater. I think that's who it'll be. But no, of course, Pitts. But I've done a lot of asking around about Pitts, and I would say this. I'll credit Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network said, look, if you have a problem with drafting a tight end at 5 or 6 overall, just cross out the TE next to his name and put a WR next to his name. He's the best receiver in the draft. He's the best tight end. He's the best receiver. So if you don't want a tight end, just call him a receiver. He's the best pass catcher in the draft. Yeah. So yeah, you could do that and just call him a wide receiver at that point.
And the next pick is 18, and this is another team that, again, let's say they go with Pitts or a wide receiver. All right, then that means, look, if they go wide receiver, it's not like they're – well, no, let's put it this way. If they don't go after Pitts, it's not like they're going to spend any other picks on a tight end. It's not a need for them, but he was such a valuable player that if he's there, take him. But with that second pick, they could go cornerback, and they could also, if they don't go wide receiver or tight end, let's say they go Sewell with that first pick, then they definitely need a weapon on offense, either a number 1 running back or a number 1 type wide receiver if they can get one.
Yep, Najee Harris is a guy you see pegged for them a lot. Like I said, I like the idea of going offensive line there at 6 and then coming back to maybe a Rashad Bateman or somebody like that as a receiver at their second,
18,
first round.
Yep, 18.
Yeah.
All right, now let's go to Denver. And this is going to be interesting because, again, Carolina looks pretty set. They're not going to be making any moves to trade up now that they have Darnold. So if there's going to be a team early in the draft, I'm not talking about 15, 20. I'm talking about in that early range, it's Denver. Because I don't know. I mean, we don't know what they feel about Locke. And here's the thing. Even though Elway was a part of taking Locke, this is a new GM, Peyton. We know how it is. You have a new GM. Look at what happened with Douglas. They want their own guy. So it's possible that this is where a quarterback slips. Maybe Trey Lance slips. Maybe he's here, because I doubt Josh Fields is slipping to 9. I think the only guy that slips is possibly Lance, maybe Mac Jones. But do you think Denver, whether they stay at 9 or decide to move up, do you think they get out of the first round without a quarterback?
Oh, good question. It really depends where the other quarterbacks go. So we know 3 are off the board in the first 3 picks. So we're talking Mac Jones and Trey Lance, basically, and Justin Fields. So we're saying one of those guys goes 3, and there's 2 left. Do I think? No, I don't. I think probably if you're asking me, I think they probably end up with Trey Lance or Mac Jones or Justin Fields. I think if you're asking me, those 3 of them go in the first 3 picks, and the other ones go to Denver and New England. Though that would be my guess. Whether they trade up to get him or they stay at 9 and get him, I would say they probably end up with a quarterback in their first, somewhere in the top 10.
Now, I had Denver on my mock draft with Dan, and so I took Lance with the first pick. And the second pick for Denver was it was almost too perfect. I put taking Dylan Raduntz, his offensive tackle from North Dakota State, because that's exactly what Denver needs when you're taking a look at their other major need. They have to get another tackle, and because we don't look, James is probably going to play. There's talk about maybe he retires, but there's a lot of friction in the locker room with him, not because he opted out, but because what happened before that. And they have to find a tackle in this draft.
Yeah, they do. I would agree. I think they also need to address the secondary. I think they also need somebody in the secondary there in the first 2 rounds. So they're not a very good team. They don't have a very good. They don't seem to have a great direction right now. This is a really important draft for them.
And this is another situation where with Peyton there, you could see if he doesn't feel like, look, I got one quarterback left, and it's Mac Jones, let's just say. All right, now I'm not infatuated with Mac Jones. I could see Denver trading down because Peyton needs to put his stamp on this franchise, and he's here as a developmental guy, as a guy that is going to try to put as many young prospects on this team as possible. So Denver's definitely a trade down team, especially if a team wants to come up and grab one of those quarterbacks if Denver doesn't want that quarterback.
I think 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are all trade down opportunities for anybody who wants a quarterback.
All right, let's go to the Chargers, another team inside the AFC West. And the Chargers, boy, I was taking a look at them yesterday again, because I did not write about this team. They're out west. There's not a lot just not a team you get a lot of news from. And when I went through their roster and their offseason moves, this is just a bad roster. They are very fortunate that they have their quarterback, and they have one of the better defensive players in the game in Bosa. And Derwin James, if he can stay healthy, has got superstar written all over him. And Keenan Allen, we know how good he is. So they've got a handful of really elite players. But after that, there's just such a big drop-off in talent.
Yeah, that's a fair look. For years and years and years, the Chargers were a really talented team that underachieved, and now they're a young rebuilding team with, like you said, a couple premier stars, like premier top end stars, but the middle of a roster, players 10 through 30 that really can decide if you win a game, are not very good. So yeah, they need some upgrades. They need probably, I don't know. They need to come out of this draft with probably 4 or 5 starters.
If you look at it, again, this is another team, even though they have the same general manager, the new head coach in Staley, so he's going to bring his defense, which did a tremendous job with the Rams last year. And, yeah, Bosa there, as I mentioned. But after that, there's Ingram's a free agent now. He doesn't look like he's coming back. They're going to need to find as many pass rushers. Bosa's just, you can't win with just one guy. So they need pass rush help, and they also have got to find some corners. They have some real issues in the secondary, after Derwin James.
Yeah, I think Patrick Surtain's a real option for them at
And
13.
by the way, I like the only good move they made in free agency, which was signing Corey Linsley. When you have a young quarterback like that, it's very smart to add a really good center that you can team up with for the next 3 or 4 years. All right, Patriots, New England Patriots. Now, this is going to be the mystery team. Will the Patriots trade up to get a quarterback?
And here's the thing, Greg, right? Like we all want to project our feelings onto the Patriots. Like Tom Brady's gone, you can't win with Cam Newton. The Patriots never draft this high. They'll never have this opportunity again. But Bill, and then it's like, well, Bill Belichick has never drafted a quarterback in the first round. Well, for 20 years, he didn't have to draft a quarterback in the first round. So why would he draft a in the first round? He's not like fundamentally opposed to it. He didn't need to. Well, then it's like, well, in the 90s with the Browns, he didn't do it. He went with like Bernie Kosar and Testaverde. It's like, well, that was a different world. Like when you were drafting in 1992 is not the same as drafting in 2021. Like the quarterback value is all different. The way the game is played is different. You don't complete 52% of your passes anymore. If you're a good quarterback, you complete 70% of your passes now. So we all want to project our own feelings onto the Patriots. What they actually do, I would guess they would trade up, but that's just based more on like talking to people outside the Patriots and what other teams would do in their situation. But they're their own animal, man. When you see what they did in free agency, no one saw that coming, that spending spree. So what they're going to do, to me, honestly, they're as likely to trade down to 30 and just like not pick a quarterback as they are to trade up and get Justin Fields to me. I mean, I remember sitting there last year on Thursday on the draft and on Friday on the draft, be like, oh, okay, they're up. They're going to take, okay, the next guy is Jake Fromm. They're going to definitely take Jake Fromm.
Yeah.
And then they took like 2 tight ends. And it was like, okay, well, they're definitely going to take Jacob Eason. And then they took like 2 more tight ends. So they just don't care what you think they're supposed to do.
Well, Cam's there for another year. That's about it, unless he has a really good renaissance. He's got more weapons now than he had last year, that's for sure. But look, they're grabbing a quarterback at some point. They just have to. It's just a matter of, do they trade up? Does Mac Jones slip to them? Is he sitting there? Is that exactly the type of quarterback that they're looking for? And I had JT O'Sullivan on. He's got that quarterback YouTube channel. And I was asking him about the quarterbacks, and he actually, I was told, all right, everybody's top 5. And he was like, oh, really? Oh, what's the top 5? And I was like, oh, that's the indication that he's got a quarterback in there that's not supposed to be in there. And he believes Kellen Mond should be in the top 5. He thinks he could be a first-round draft pick. So even a Kellen Mond is a guy that could easily go to a team like the Patriots.
Yep. Kellen Mond's a guy I suspect you could see as the 31st or 32nd pick in this draft. Some team does the Lamar Jackson thing of trading from the second round into the late first round so that you get him with a 5th-year option on his contract as a first-round pick rather than a second-round pick. I would expect, I don't know the team, but I would expect Kellen Mond could very well be the 31st or 32nd pick in this year's draft.
All right, as far as let's say outside of quarterbacks, well, running back is in the running. So keep an eye on that.
I don't believe they're the team that will use I know they've done it in the past with like Lawrence Maroney. I don't think they'll use a first-round pick on a running back.
Even though they went out and made a couple of moves at wide receiver, a wide receiver is definitely in the mix as well. So keep that in mind. But they have had so many failures. That has been the major failure on offense forever. But maybe since Moss, I guess, between free agency and the draft, is finding good wide receivers. They have just completely missed on like the last 20 receivers that they have tried to recruit into that franchise. So that will be interesting. And on defense, maybe they have to look at another corner. I mean, I don't know how much longer Stephon Gilmore is going to be around. He probably has one more year.
J.C. Horn, I think, is a real possibility at 15 if it's not a corner.
All right.
I mean, if it's quarterback.
Next up, let's talk Las Vegas and another team. Maybe because they're out west, they don't have an early pick, but not a lot of talk with the Raiders. so far. And I was kind of surprised that nobody really brought up quarterback. I just don't know what to believe with the Raiders in this Derek Carr Gruden relationship. It just seems like they love each other, and then the next day Gruden's looking for another quarterback. So I don't know what to expect. That means that's an open possibility. They did a lot of weird things on the offensive line this offseason when they let 3 of their top linemen go and they brought in a couple other guys. But and look, they need some of their draft picks that they've, not that this regime has used, but they've got Colton Miller, they have Brandon Parker. So these are a couple of guys that they need to work out. They drafted John Simpson at guard last year, but they definitely need another lineman at some point.
Yeah, I agree. On defense, I think they could they could take the first defensive tackle off the board. They could take a linebacker. Let's not forget, they do some strange things. Like Damon Arnett, I think, was their first round pick last year. He was a guy most people thought was a second round pick. They took him like 19 or 20. And then either last year or 2 years ago, they took Clelin Ferrell.
Yes.
And he was a guy most people thought was like a mid-round pick.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to take a guy maybe 15 or 20 picks before group thinks the guy should go. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a defensive tackle because that's their big need on defense.
The Ngakoue deal was an important one for them because they needed to add some more pass rush, with that 4-3. So that was a nice one. But yeah, DBs, definitely. They have to add some DBs to that secondary. But also, they've got to get, like you mentioned, not just Arnett. They have to get Amick Robertson. They've got to get Jonathan Abram. They've got to get Trayvon Mullen. They've got to get Isaiah Johnson. These are all early round DBs that the organization has spent good capital on over the last few years. They've got to make, they got to get something from these guys, but they still have to have more depth. But again, the big mystery is going to be quarterback. And whether or not Derek Carr's the man or not.
I don't see it. I think they're like a married couple 20 years into the relationship. They like each other. There might be some regrets, but they're for the most part they're like this is working.
I mean, look, Carr's a good quarterback. If he's surrounded by some really good talent, it's you could do a lot worse. So.
Look, that's it. I mean, that's it. That's no man's land in the NFL. You're almost better having like the 30th best quarterback because then you need a new one.
Yeah.
Then you are having the 15th best quarterback because you're like, oh, on a good year he's like the 8th best quarterback. On a bad year he's like the 23rd best quarterback, and you're just in no man's land, and that's where they are.
Colts, and they made the big move for Carson Wentz, but they have got to find a left tackle. Look, this Sam Tevi move, you can put him on the depth chart, left tackle, Sam Tevi, but that would be the shock of shockers if he was the opening day left tackle for the Colts. I think the Colts are definitely one of the teams that will find the veteran. One of those offensive linemen that are still unsigned, an Eric Fisher type. I got to believe that. But if not, then left tackle could be where they go in this draft.
No, I think that's where they will go. I think we agree here. I think they could very well go Jalen Mayfield or Sam Cosmi or somebody like that. They're a trade down candidate too. They could certainly move down from 21 to later in the first round and take a left tackle. I think that's where they'll go. Edge rusher is a possibility, yes. But I think offensive tackle somewhere in the 20s, not necessarily 21, could be 27, could be 29. I think that's their first pick.
Yeah, they have not. And I have it in the report, and I'm trying to remember when it was, but it's been like since, I'm trying to think of, was it Feeney? Feeney. Was that Freeney? Since, and that was like 2002. That's how long it's been since the Colts drafted a edge rusher in the first round that actually did anything in the NFL. That was like a really difference maker. That's how long it's been. So they've drafted a few guys, but this is an organization that has to stop drafting second-round edge rushers and use a first-round pick on an edge rusher if they can. And they're in that perfect spot to do it. I mean, that's where a lot of these edge rushers are going to go, are going to be the middle to end of the first round.
I'll do you one better there on Dwight Freeney. Do you know the last time the Giants drafted a linebacker in the first round? Not an impact linebacker.
Any linebacker.
Can you guess the year or the player?
Is it a notable player?
Very notable.
It's not Taylor.
No, it is not Lawrence Taylor, but close.
Okay. It's not Antonio Pierce, right?
Carl Banks in
Carl Banks. Okay.
1984.
84. Oh, my goodness gracious.
That's the last time they drafted a first-round linebacker.
And, it's interesting. About 10 or 15 years ago, I remember saying exactly what is said now. The Giants, when they've won their championships, have had these dominating outside or interior linebackers. They've either had this quarterback in the middle or this edge rusher. What are they waiting for? Why won't they go after that guy?
The first two Super Bowls were all about the linebackers. LT Banks, Gary Reasons, like that, and Harry Carson. And the last two Super Bowls were all about the defensive line. Strahan, JPP, Umenyiora, Tuck, and they don't have a dominant front seven right now.
All right, and we'll break down the Giants draft on the NFC talk next week. We're now at Tennessee, and they picked 22nd. And Tennessee had that strange kind of switch where they decided, okay, we're going to forget about our tight end and our receiver. We're going to put the money at an injured ACL Bud Dupree. So that's a gamble. We know they need an edge rusher. There's no question about it, but they're taking a gamble. A.J. Brown is a stud, but, boy, they got to get some more wide receivers. If anything happens to A.J. Brown, they've got nobody at wide receiver and tight end.
I think wide receiver is certainly a spot. I don't think there's not another first-round tight end. So
no.
I don't think, they'll address that somewhere. I would expect, day 2, early day 3. But wide receiver is certainly a very strong possibility for them. We saw what was Justin Jefferson? Was he the 22nd pick or the 23rd pick? Obviously, that's what they'd be hoping for at 22 is that kind of impact player. I think there's a lot of guys in receiver who fit in that 20 to 35 range. I've mentioned Bateman already, Elijah Moore. I think that's a very strong possibility. And again, I'll keep coming back to it. You said you had got him all the way at 34 in your mock draft. If Caleb Farley's there at 22, he could definitely be the pick.
Yeah, Tennessee needs some corners. That's been an issue for them for the last few years. They just were terrible last year, so they got to get some corners.
And I got another corner, and this goes with 23 too, who's, the Jets are up next. A guy who could go either 22 or 23 who's definitely rising up boards is the Northwestern cornerback, Greg Newsome.
Yeah, he did. He had a really good workout. So, and look, right now they got Kendall Lamb penciled in as their starting right tackle. That ain't going to work out. So I'm not sure if they still have to sign someone, but just taking a look, they don't have anybody that's still available on their own unrestricted free agents, so they're going to have to find another right tackle too. All right, Pittsburgh, the Steelers. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, I was looking, this is another team, when I was looking over their roster the other day, I couldn't believe how many needs they have. They lost some key guys. There are some other spots. Look, they have enough wide receivers, we know that. They don't have a number one running back right now. Connor's not even, I don't even know if they want to re-sign Connor, because keep in mind, their draft situation is kind of I mean, it's okay. It's middle of the road, but they don't have a number one running back. They've got to, at some point, add another tight end, because Eric Ebron, they can't count on him for more than a year. Offensive line is now an issue. It's their number one issue, because right now they've got no center. They have no right tackle, unless you want to start Joe Haig. And if you think B.J. Finney is going to be your starting center. So they have, and look, the kid that they drafted in 2018 in the third round will fit at right tackle more than likely. But they need a tackle, a center, and they also have to add a number one running back on, and that's just on offense.
Yeah, running back, they'll be one of those teams that gets a day 3 running back or something. And, knowing the Steelers, he'll end up being like an all-pro running back. That's a place I'd want to I'd want to go if I was a running back. But no, absolutely. I think you drive offensive lines where they'll go early in this draft.
And they have to add another linebacker now to replace, even though Alex Highsmith will hopefully replace Dupree, but they have to add another edge rusher just in case. They have to add another corner. They lost Hilton to free agency. He was a really big, they don't have anybody in the slot right now at corner. And they also, as we move to the next team, they also have to consider, are they going to draft a quarterback this year? And if they do they draft a quarterback in the first round?
That decision should already be made if you're the Steelers. You have to decide. Ben Roethlisberger's coming back, so are we going for it with Ben Roethlisberger? If so, we can't waste a first-round pick on a backup to Ben Roethlisberger. If you're not going for it, then he shouldn't even be on your team. So to me, they can't pick a first-round quarterback. I know we talk about the Falcons doing that with Matt Ryan. Well, it's different if you're at 4. But we've seen too many times where these – and I know somebody will throw Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre in my face. But we've seen too many times where these teams that are competing for a championship waste a first-round pick on a quarterback to back up the starter. Well,
you mean like the Packers?
Maybe Jordan Love is going to be great, yeah. Maybe. But if you could have told me if you could go back and draft a cornerback over Jordan Love, maybe the Packers are in the Super Bowl because Kevin King, is that who it was? Maybe he doesn't give up those 2 huge plays. If you slot in a corner there instead of Jordan Love, maybe you're in the Super Bowl last year. And then, you don't have Jordan Love, but you have a chance at a Super Bowl.
Or maybe you have maybe you have someone like Jefferson or one of those really good wide receivers that you could have used that pick on. And instead of settling for a field goal late in the game, you could have scored a touchdown because you had another receiver.
I hate when teams with veteran quarterbacks who are in championship competition waste a first-round pick on a quarterback who's going to sit. I hate it. I know it worked out with Rodgers and Favre. I hate it. I don't think it's the right move. It's different when you're the Falcons. You're picking 4. It's different if you're going to trade up to 10 and get Mahomes like the Chiefs did. But to pick a quarterback in the mid-20s, I think is just kind of wasting what you are. Unless you're picking in the mid-20s because you're not a good team like the Jaguars.
All right, let's go to Cleveland now. And this has to early picks are all going to be about the defense. No question about it. They need a pass rusher. This is another team that has not spent enough of their free agent money or draft capital in the last several years on pass rushing help from Myles Garrett. It's Myles Garrett, and that's it. Now, Olivier Vernon finally had a breakthrough again last year. Then he tears his Achilles. So now he's out until maybe November or December, and they haven't even signed him yet. So they have to get another pass rusher on this team. They also have to throw in another coverage type of back 7 guy, maybe one of those hybrid types that with speed. So look for this. So I think even though Delpit's coming back and Greedy Williams are coming back, these are inexperienced, injured guys that you just can't 100% count on. So they have to add more secondary help. All of their draft capital this offseason has to be like 80% defense.
Well, who was the team who did that last year? Was it Matt Rule? Matt Rule did that last year.
Carolina, all of their draft picks are on defense.
Yeah, I could see something very similar to that. Look, they know they need edge rusher. They went after Watt. They didn't get him. I won't be surprised if that's where Clowney winds up.
Yeah.
Yes, I think defense, front 7 especially, is where they'll turn.
Yeah, and even if they get Clowney, they still need to add at least another early round pick on a defensive lineman. But secondary is probably then the biggest issue if they get Clowney. And it could be one of the top corners that goes to Cleveland. And look, they should also, in the later rounds, they might want to think about adding depth at like running back and receiver, but most of the top stuff should be on defense. Baltimore, the Ravens. This is an organization that has cap problems, which is the reason why, from what we hear right now, that they're still looking to trade their tackle. It hasn't happened yet. I'm going to talk to Tony Lombardi on Friday, who covers the Ravens, and find out more about what's going on there. But Orlando Brown is still a trade candidate at right tackle. If that happens, maybe Tyree Phillips moves in. Who knows? But still, Baltimore's we heard all about how much better Lamar Jackson would be if they had a really good number one wide receiver. You know what? Maybe there's going to be pressure to get a number one wide receiver.
I would have liked to see them do it in free agency. The Ravens are one of those teams that rarely makes a mistake, so you hate to question their personnel because you're like, no, they have a pretty good track record. I think they really should have made more of a play for a Corey Davis or a Kenny Golladay. They didn't. That tells me they're going to go get one in the draft, but then you're pairing a young receiver and Marquise Brown with another young receiver. Don't love it, but I think that's probably what they'll have to do.
And by the way, I remember the last time I spoke to Tony Lombardi, he told me that it would be a big mistake if they trade Orlando Brown and slide Phillips at right tackle. He doesn't think Phillips is a tackle, so that could still be a position that if they trade Brown before or after the draft that they're looking at anyway. So keep an eye on that. And they also need a center. There's a big issue there at center. They've got lunch pail type guys now at center. They need a premium center. That maybe there'll be somebody to take one of the top centers on the board, early in the draft.
Who's your best center? Is it the guy from Alabama who tore his ACL?
He could very well be. Yeah, he's up there, but he's also, like you just mentioned, he's a little bit got the injury prone.
Yeah, I would hesitate to use a first round pick on a guy like that.
No, I agree. I don't think you're going to see any first round centers this year. All right, let's go next to Buffalo, the Bills. They were close last year. But one of the main issues they had on offense, the main issue, was they had zero running game. Nothing. So now they don't have their first round pick is 30th. This is the latest that they have drafted in the first round since 1966. So, but this is also premium running back territory. Yeah. And I don't care what they think about Singletary or Moss and the potential that those guys have. If they can get one of those top three running backs, especially if they can get one of the top two running backs, they have to do it.
Yes, I think if Etienne or Harris is there, that's the pick. Yes. If not, then I could see a trade down or I could see an edge rusher.
Yeah, defensively, this is not as strong as a defense as it was a couple of years ago. So they have to add a little bit on defense too. So
pass rusher, I think, is what they have to add on.
Yeah,
specifically pass rusher. I like the secondary. I like the run stopping. They need to be able to get after Mahomes or get after. You saw how Tampa got after Mahomes. The Bills need to be able to do that if they're going to get over the hump.
And talking with Ryan Talbot, who covers the Bills at New York Upstate, he mentioned they definitely should. Let's see, just make sure I got that. Yeah, they definitely should look to add a tight end. He thinks they could look. They need a number one tight end. Running back was easy, yeah. But they also need another hybrid, somebody that can cover tight ends on defense. So keep an eye on that. Like a chin.
Well, they hung on to Milano, which was big.
Yeah, that was surprising. Yeah. So maybe that handles that situation. Yeah. They also need a number two cornerback, and they also need a one tech defensive tackle. So that's what I got out of Ryan Talbot when I had him on the show several weeks ago. And then two more teams to go. Kansas City. That's the last. That's the team last. In the first round, 31st overall. They've got that offense. This is the other team that has an offensive line issue that you think they'd probably rather have it settled through a veteran.
I think the tackle is probably where they'll go here. I don't know how many veterans are still available that are impact tackles besides Villanueva.
Akun could go another year or two.
Yeah, I would bet on an offensive tackle being the pick. I wouldn't even rule out the Chiefs trading up for an offensive tackle because they know they don't need a lot, but they desperately need that. So I wouldn't even rule. They could be. We talked about like the Colts trading down. I could see a Colts Chiefs trade.
And then they also have to add another pass rusher. They got to get a little younger. Frank Clark just did not give them anything last year. So that was a big part of their defense when they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, was the amount of depth they had up front. They've got to get more bodies, pass rushers up front. And they also need to add, believe it or not, at some point, not early, but at some point they got to add another receiver. You know, they're at the point right now where Demarcus Robinson might only be there for a short while, and we know how much Andy Reid likes his receivers. All right, and then finally, Houston. I don't even know what to say about Houston.
They need everything. They need everything. There you go. That's it. That covers it. They need everything. No, best player available, whoever it is, we'll take them.
Yeah. And they don't even. When do they draft? What's their first pick?
Let me look it up. They have the fewest picks in the draft.
Third round.
Yeah.
They don't even have a second rounder.
No, they're a disaster.
Yeah, they have a third, 2 fourths, a fifth, 3 sixths, and a seventh.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It was Seattle I'm thinking of that only has 3 picks in the whole draft.
But by the way, Nick Caserio, say what you want about this whole Deshaun Watson thing, and I'm not talking about the potential trial that we might have, but talking about would you trade him, would you not trade him? But Caserio has done a lot. He has changed the personnel on that roster a tremendous amount since he's been there. So you can't blame him for not being active. He's just doing whatever he can to rebuild that roster. So
I just don't know if it's better.
I agree.
The easy thing, I say this all the time, the easy thing to do is to get younger as a team or to swap your roster. The hard thing to do is to get better.
And that's where the draft comes in. And unfortunately, he does not have a first or a second round draft pick. So
I could trade a 30-year-old offensive tackle for 2 fourth-round draft picks, but then I got to make the right picks. So.
And now this whole Deshaun Watson thing, I mean, nobody knows. It's just you just sit back and you wait and see what happens. But I mean, at least it's a civil suit. If you want to look at the bright side, if you're a Houston fan,
there's no bright side. There's no bright side for anyone involved.
So,
no, that's. I thought before this came up, I thought for sure he'd be traded before the draft. Now I think the only chance he'll play in the NFL at all this year is with Houston. Otherwise, I think there's a chance he doesn't even play at all if this is not resolved, or if it's resolved and we find out, that there's some truth to this. Also,
this also comes. This allows the teams in back of the draft. Maybe the Patriots, but not the Patriots because the league would never allow a Caserio-Belichick trade like that. But
no one's trading for him now.
So, but a team like Denver, there are a couple of teams that might sit there after. Again, I'm only saying if this gets cleared up enough, where, all right, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad.
No, in 2 weeks we won't.
No, not before the draft. No. I'm just talking about now that we're going to get after the draft. There are going to be teams that would never have had a shot at acquiring Watson that now come into play, like Denver and some of those teams. Hey, wait a second. Maybe we can now make a deal because, imagine Peyton trades down and accumulates some more draft capital next year. And then after this whole thing gets cleared and, he shouldn't have done this, but it wasn't all that bad.
Yeah. I don't know. I certainly can't say that. I can't say the 22 accusations or whatever we're up to now is too many for me to even speculate that it might get cleared up in any regard positively for him. 22 allegations is something you just got to take super seriously. And to me, from the football aspect, maybe he plays in Houston this year. Maybe he doesn't play at all. Those are options 1 and 2, and I don't see a third.
Yeah, you see, for me, I don't even pay attention to any of this because first of all, I don't have to, and I'm glad I don't have to, because it's one of those things where I get to now kind of wait until it's over, and then I don't have to speculate. I don't have to be like, well, maybe he did this or maybe she did this.
Not worth doing that. Don't. Yep. I don't want to speculate. No one should speculate. Let it all play out.
See what happens, and then at that point we can figure out whether or not.
It's a very secondary topic in around him right now.
All right. So what do you got working on? Anything special between now?
Yeah, I got a good story that coming out tomorrow. Just kind of on the Giants and Micah Parsons and the kind of the dilemma. If you're look, Parsons has acknowledged he's had to answer a lot about his character concerns, his red flags around him in this draft. We know that every team does this balancing act of talent versus character, but if you're the Giants and you've missed on Eric Flowers and you've missed on DeAndre Baker and you've missed on Eli Apple, three of your last 8 first-round picks, there has to be ghosts in the Giants draft room. Those misses, the Giants drafting a Micah Parsons isn't the same as a team who has the Ravens drafting a Micah Parsons. So to me, he's a referendum pick if he's there at 11 when the Giants are up there on how they feel about him, red flags, and their history recently. Because to me, they have to be looking highest floor, not highest ceiling.
Now, I don't ever remember that being a Giant thing, franchise thing. Did that start somewhere? Was it just coincidental that it's been happening lately? I just don't remember growing up seeing the Giants go after guys with checkered pasts.
No, I mean, obviously Lawrence Taylor had one, but you live with it for the greatest defensive player ever. But no, for the most part, they take a lot of pride in being a high character organization. So, and look, as one coach said to me, character and immaturity are two different things. So Micah Parsons has more immaturity in his past than he does character concerns. Character is DeAndre Baker getting arrested on gun charges, which were since dismissed. But so those are two very different things. But yeah, no, I think it's the Giants. The Giants got away from themselves a little bit the last couple of years, and I think they need to play it safe. So be very interesting if he's on the board at 11. What they do.
By the way, that was mentioning Baker's name is a great example of why you just wait until all the facts have finally come out, a decision has been made, because nobody would have expected, after what we heard about the Baker thing, that he would have gotten off. You never know.
Let's mention this. The two biggest busts of the last 2 first rounds are DeAndre Baker, because even before he got arrested, he was falling asleep in meetings and whatnot. And Isaiah Wilson, who, obviously he's already been cut by 2 teams after 1 season in the NFL. Both of those guys were Georgia guys. If I'm picking a Georgia guy, and the Giants are a team who picks a lot of Georgia guys, if I'm picking a Georgia guy, I'm doing twice as much homework as anybody else.
Jake Fromm even had a little bit of a.
Yeah, I was more saying something stupid than than a cuttable offense.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, of all the talent that's come out of Georgia over the last few years, have any of those guys worked out? I mean, even Michelle has just been kind of
Yeah, but that's different than.
No, I'm just saying. I'm kind of changing now, moving on to, now that I'm thinking about it, Georgia's.
Andrew Thomas was the worst of the 4 tackles as a
early,
rookie last
right.
year.
Yeah, okay.
Lorenzo Carter, the Giants picked.
He's been
okay.
Yeah.
He's been okay. No, I would have to go back pick by pick and see. But
well, that'll be something that we'll keep an eye on. We're going to talk NFC on next week's program. So, in another week, we'll have gone down as far as we get closer to the NFL draft. And like I said, we'll have our mock draft. We'll let you know when that's going to come out. But the draft guide is going to be available in a few days. So don't forget that. Check out ourlads.com. And Ryan, we'll talk NFC football next week.
Sounds good. Look